Good morning, everybody. Apologies for the display and all those good things. I was wanting to do some multi-camera stuff, get all smart and funky, but I couldn't get it working in time. And I really want to have a chat to you and explain to you what I did with attempt. I started it, I put it onto social media yesterday. So I am going to talk you through all of this. So this is the Great Hexie project. The Great Hexie is now finished, and I can show it to you because I sort of decided quite early on that I wasn't going to enter it into the 2021 quilt show. Now the hair has gone all funky, but I'm sure everybody gets that too. So yes, so I decided quite early on that I wasn't going to enter this into a quilt show after all. If you are somebody who likes to enter into quilt shows, then let me know in the comments why it is that you do that and explain sort of, what you get out of that. And yeah, maybe we can have a chat about it. So this is attempt. It can be interpreted in quite a lot of different ways. It's up to you whether you want to see this as a positive or a negative. To me, it's a little bit of both. So tell me, what do you see? There's a few things that's possible here. First of all, it could be an attempt at quilting, so an attempt at escaping your great fabric stash. It could be an attempt at escaping the feeling of being locked in, as we're all in lockdown at the moment. It could, cabin fever, or it could be breaking a particular habit. But in reality, it's actually quite a bit darker than that. We'll get into that maybe just a little bit later. So let's look at what I've used on this quilt. First of all, I dyed my own fabric in yellow and then green to get like this earthy effect. I've been talking about my daughter cutting the hexagons. So she did that from all my leftover bits and pieces until I had no more appliqué paper left. I've still got quite a bit of bits of pieces of fabric, but something will come up for that. Right, so the hexagons were on appliqué paper because I was never intending to do English paper piecing. If you do EPP, good on you if you do. The first time I did EPP was in school. I made my very first quilting project in domestic science class, huishoudkunde. And it was all going to be done by hand. It was sort of the year project, I think, and it was the last year that I was doing domestic science. Back then, you could choose your subjects for the rest of high school in standard 8. Or you can still do it, it's just now grade 10, I think. Anyway, the pillow was hexagons, and we in class, all of this was done in class, for most of it. And then the whole hand stitching bit, and then more hand stitching of these hexies together into the design. And after that came the quilting bit. And of course, of this, none of this was explained to us as being patchwork or quilting or anything like that. This was just, this is what you're doing and this is your project. And back then, it's about being able to run your house. And yeah, it's quite a while back. So by the time we got to I insisted on doing the stitching part by machine. The stitching between the hexies, that would be the quilting. And of course, some girls got that really poofy batting, that poofy batting, that, the really thick stuff. But I didn't. The teacher wasn't particularly happy about that because back in those days, everything had to be poofy. And of course, she insisted that I'm not allowed to do it by machine because I wouldn't be able to do it accurately. And she would deduct marks for that. But of course, what did I do? I took the blooming thing and stitched it on my mom's sewing machine. And as I recall, I got full marks for that project. So hand stitching's backside. Anyway, so attempt was going to be appliqué. I hadn't decided on the name for the quilt at the time. And the full idea actually only really materialized after I dyed the fabric. And yeah, I sort of like it when that happens. I'm sure it happens to a lot of us. You're sort of pulling fabric out of your stash, maybe stitching things together, and somewhere in there, suddenly you can see your final result. And that's pretty much what happened to me with this. I first was just going to do hexes on a background, and that would be the quilt. But yeah, like I say, once I had done the dyeing on the fabric, I had changed my mind. So I then, with this idea in my mind, I decided that I'm going to need a dress shirt. And I'm not actually like the dress shirt kind of person. I don't really have anything like that in my cupboard. So I asked hubby, and he gave me a few options, and I took one. I cut the sleeves off and created 2 samples of what I thought the coloring should be. One ended up being a bit too close to the dyed fabric, and I wanted some definition so that it stood out. So I made a darker one, and that was the one that went on. And of course, painting this was so much fun, because I literally drenched the sleeve with water and then used intense blocks and just had a mush of colors over each other to get like a dirty, grimy look. I'm telling a story in this quilt, and this girl at that point, when the zipper opens, needs to be dirty and grimy, like life is dirty and grimy. And you don't get to that point without getting really filthy. Work in the life. The trenches of life, kind of filthy. So how did I make this and put this together? So first came the embroidery. The embroidery is actually my own hand. I took a photograph, I digitized it on my software. It's all a tangle of thread in different colors. I decided on the thread color only at the time that I stitched it out. The tester was all in purple and on purple fabric, so I used purple variations, and I liked the way that the fabric shows through the embroidery, so I worked and chose my colors based on the background. The sleeve gave me a little bit of trouble in the thick parts, especially like in the cuff and that. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to have it buttoned or not. And the final decision came that it was going to be buttoned. I'm a neat kind of a person, so yeah, I just decided that this needs to be all buttoned, and yeah, this whole quilt is about me. My sewing machine didn't like the idea of going through so many layers with all the thickness going. So remember now at that stage, it was just the back, the fabric, and the sleeve. But my sewing machine didn't like going through all of that. So I ended up basting that by hand. So I basted it by hand and decided that I was then I would attach it to the quilt with the long arm machine, because the machine was obviously stronger. Then it was time to add the zipper. So I chose a nice chunky zipper. I realized that I had a nice chunky zipper from a previous project that I had thought about doing but never produced. So then I had to decide just how far I want this zipper to be opened. And I only had this particular length because obviously all the shops are closed. We're still in lockdown, so all of this was done during lockdown. And e-commerce wasn't allowed then yet either. So I had to do all of this with what I had, which was great actually, because you come up with different ideas and different ways of doing things. So I decided that I really wanted this arm to look like it's really reaching out there, like get somebody to notice kind of thing. So the zipper couldn't be opened further than the bottom of the sleeve. And then it was just simply a matter of stitching the zipper to the fabric. And then somewhere along the line, I'd made the decision that all of this should be in the middle of the fabric. I actually didn't mark the middle or anything on the fabric beforehand, but fortunately I had a nice big piece of fabric, so whatever wasn't in the middle after that would just be cut off. So I then sorted the, sorry, I was just thinking about this a bit. I then sorted the hexes from a dark color to a bright color. Now it's easier to see it when you're looking at it from a distance. I will take a photograph of it later and that will go on to the blog post. But the idea was to get all the dark colors as close as possible to the zipper and then go from there, go through to the brighter colors. This part of the quilt is the darkest of the theme and it really isn't perfect. I decided that, the plan was all along to actually paint this with ink tints. Sorry, I'm going to put this laptop down because I'm starting to struggle to talk you through this. I hope you can still see. So I decided that, well, originally the plan was going to be to paint all of these hexes with ink tints. And then I realized that it may impact or compromise the hexes. You know, the appliqué paper, I was worried that that might come loose. So I was sort of needing to come up with a plan for that. So the plan then changed to remember that I actually had a piece of organza in a drawer somewhere. So I decided that I was going to search for that and I used that. And again, it was organza that I bought for a completely different project. And yeah, I never executed a project. I'm sure you've got all of those things. I lay the organza over the hexes that weren't all fitting properly. So you can see that the hexes in places, I'm trying to find a spot now, which is good that I can't actually find it. So the hexes didn't quite fit together perfectly like they would if you were doing English paper piecing. You could still manipulate the hexes a bit, but because I was doing appliqué, if the pieces didn't fit 100%, I tried with different pieces to try and get the best fit, but I couldn't. So perfection was never the aim. I'd never really decided that this whole thing needed to be 100% perfect, because this is life, and life isn't perfect and all these things. So I lay the organza over the hexes, and I quite like the glitzy look of the organza over the hexes. And I also like the way that it kind of gives the quilt, this part of the quilt, like a plasticky look. It's kind of hard to explain, but you can also feel it. It's when you stitch through so many, when you stitch so much, and the quilting is really, really dense, it becomes hard. Your quilt gets hard when you do so much. And that, with the glitziness of the organza, gave it this sort of plasticky look. Now, I had first decided that I was going to put on 2 layers of organza. I wanted to make it really, really dark. And I used 505, and I sprayed and attached the first layer of the organza, and then I sprayed some more and I added another layer of organza, because the plan was to stitch all these layers during the quilting process. So before I got to the quilting and the quilt machine, oh, there's a nice little thread. And it's under the couching, so you can't see it. I attached it to the zipper with a seam, so that it didn't fray. I didn't want it to fray away and then like really get lost. And then, of course, I decided that 2 layers of organza was too much, which brought me to a little bit of a problem, because I took the top layer off and then I had a really, really sticky surface. And I tried to wipe that stickiness off with a soapy cloth, but it didn't do much at all. It really didn't help. And I really needed to protect my hopping foot from all that gummy business, because it was going to just scrunch up and really make it difficult to quilt. So I decided that I was just going to use water-soluble stabilizer. Again, this is something that I use a lot. I mean, this it's not like the other stuff that was bought for a different project. I've got it, and I added that on top. So the quilt design choice, I was first going to stitch between the hexagons when I originally started this, but because they didn't quite fit 100%. So the idea at first was to give it this like pressless, quilty kind of a look. If you don't know what pressless is, go and Google it. It was quite popular in South Africa in the 80s and the 90s. And those things have got a lifetime, like McDonald's chips. Anyway, the preservation on that stuff was really, really good. But because the hexes didn't all fit properly, I didn't want to add more definition to that. So I didn't want to emphasize the fact that the hexes didn't fit. So if I were to go through and stitch through all the hexes, and over there you can actually see quite a bit. Let me bring the camera closer. There you can see how the hexie didn't actually fit. So I have a whole lot of hexes here that really doesn't fit. But because of the way that I quilted, and by the time that the whole thing was done with the organza, you actually don't notice that at all. So I was sitting on the couch in the lounge, and in the lounge I've still got that Christmas themed quilt is still hanging there. Yes, I know it's almost June, but it's still there. Christmas is around the corner. And on there is a block that has this sort of unplanned pipe system kind of a look. So which is really what this is. It really is just a mixture of lines up and down, and making sure that you're crossing your lines but keeping a squareness to it. When I think of this, I think of the girl in Hunger Games and that whole pipe system that they had to try and find their way out. So yeah, so that was the whole kind of thing. And it also goes back into the theme, because it's complicated. It's not a simple thing. It is complicated. So the edges over here, I did stitch down like I would with a quilt. So I've got the whole hexie line being followed along there, and some more thread. But everything else over here has the whole pipe system. So I decided to do some couching around the zipper, again in line with the theme, which was to give this whole colorful attraction of the fabric. But remember, now we have the darkness of the organza going over it, but the whole attraction of being drawn to the brightness and the color, and to the softness and the warm and fuzzy feeling that you'll get like from a nice blanket wrapping around you, that warm hug kind of a feeling. So I did the couching around the zippers for that. Then the background quilting around the hand and the arm. I chose like a ragged broken glass kind of a design. I usually, when I doodle, when I'm supposed to be listening and paying attention in meetings in the good old corporate days, I would doodle triangles, and that was the result that was on the quilt. The only quilting around the hand and the sleeve of the hand and the sleeve is around it, like I would do for appliqué. So that's it. The binding was done as usual. I did add a bit of a decorative stitch to it, like I normally do. I gave this a bit of thought. I wasn't sure if I was going to share the whole theme of this quilt with you. It is a little bit sensitive, and I'm still thinking about it. But post in the comments if you think you've figured it out, and give me a stab. Take a stab at a guess. Yes. What a day. Until next week, look after yourselves and your loved ones. South Africa is going into a lighter stage of lockdown, which will leave a lot of people exposed to the virus. So please take precautions and follow the safety guidelines. Until next week, I hope you have a good one, and then we'll chat again next week. Toodles.